Who has seen the wind? Neither I nor you. But when the leaves hang trembling, the wind is passing through. Who has seen the wind? Neither you nor I. But when the trees bow down their heads, the wind is passing by. It strikes me that this poem, written by 19th century children's poet Christina Georgina Rossetti, is appropriate for today, this being Pentecost Sunday, and I've entitled my thoughts, Who Has Seen the Holy Spirit? I first became aware of this poem when I saw the second half of it in the flyleaf of a book entitled Who Has Seen the Wind?, written by Canadian author W.O. Mitchell. The reason I noticed it at all was that when W.O. Mitchell's book was turned into a movie in 1977, Arcola, Saskatchewan was used as a filming location. In the late 1960s, when I was a child, my much older brother-in-law and sister owned and operated the Arcola Pharmacy. My sister and brother-in-law lived on the second floor of the old pharmacy, which has since become a heritage building, and it featured prominently in the film. I have fond memories of being a 10-year-old boy and walking out of their pharmacy home onto the then bustling main street of a classic prairie town. From my own experience, Arcola was the perfect setting for the story of a boy's life on the Canadian prairie. Who has seen the wind? Neither you nor I, but when the trees bow down their heads, the wind is passing by. Those are memorable lines for me, and I have quoted them on many windy days since, but I have come to think that they are especially applicable on Pentecost Sunday. In fact, they are remarkably reminiscent of some words in the Bible. Within the well-known encounter between Jesus and Nicodemus recorded in John chapter 3, we find the following statement in verse 8. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. It's worth noting that in the Greek language of the New Testament, John used the same word for wind and for spirit. Today on Pentecost, I think we can rightly take the thoughts in John 3 verse 8 to say, the Spirit blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell from or where it's blowing. With that connection between wind and spirit, it's no wonder that in Acts 2, the coming of the Holy Spirit is associated with wind, even though there, separate words are used for wind and spirit. Acts 2 begins by stating, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. That's in Acts 2 verses 1 and 2. When we read the description of the coming of the Holy Spirit in Acts 2, it's easy to skip over the reference to the wind of God's Spirit and focus on the intriguing dynamic of people speaking in languages unknown to themselves, as if that is the most important part of Pentecost. The link between wind, spirit, and breath is even stronger in the Hebrew language of the Old Testament, where the word ruach is regularly used for all three. The idea of God as spirit is as old as the beginning of the Bible. The second verse in the Bible, in the Old King James Version, states, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God, Ruach, moved upon the face of the waters. That's Genesis 1 verse 2. I suspect the idea of the Spirit of God moving upon the waters of the uncreated world comes from the idea that God's Spirit is a wind or a breath that is in constant motion. The Bible doesn't encourage us to envision God's Spirit as being static or stationary, but to rather experience the Holy Spirit as an energy that is in constant motion. The link between breath, wind, and spirit is vividly portrayed in Ezekiel's vision of the valley of dry bones that was read for us from Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 to 14. The vision of the valley of dry bones was given to Ezekiel in order to provide hope for a nation that was exiled in Babylon and whose own country lay in ruins. In addition to providing hope for the future, the vision gives us insight into the working of God's Spirit. In these 14 verses, the Hebrew word ruach occurs 9 times and is variously translated as breath in verses 5, 6, 8, and 10, as wind in verse 9, and as God's Spirit in verse 14. It's a startling vision that you can't hear without a visceral reaction. I can still hear the voice of a preacher reading this passage when I was a child and emphasizing that the bones were very dry. While the image of a valley full of sun-bleached human bones may sound gruesome at first, there is the instant sense that nothing is beyond recovery when the wind of God's Spirit breathes life. With good reason, hearing Ezekiel's words brings a shiver to our souls. Then he said to me, "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord." It's Ezekiel 37, verses 4 to 6. And that's exactly what happened. The bones rattled together, they became covered in tendons and flesh, and an army of people rose to life. The vision restored hope for a nation that it would return to its own lands through the breath and wind of God's Spirit. A central message of the vision of the dry bones is that there is always hope when the ruach of God, the wind of God's Spirit, is available to breathe life into a situation that was previously thought to be hopeless. It's that life-giving breath which makes Pentecost such a special event. Pentecost represents the promise that we are never separated from the wind of God's Spirit. Christmas is important because without the birth of Christ, we don't have the incarnation of God and we don't have Christianity. Good Friday is important because without the crucifixion, we wouldn't understand the sacrificial nature of God and how much we are loved. The resurrection, of course, is pivotal to our faith because it encompasses our eternal hope. And Pentecost deserves to be on the list of important dates we as Christians celebrate because without it, we wouldn't know that God's Spirit is always available to us to breathe life into our lives, even when we think that life has passed us by. Here are a couple of associations we can make with the Holy Spirit. First, the Holy Spirit moves and moves us. We can't see the Holy Spirit, but we can see the effect of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit longs to fill the sails propelling our lives, taking us in directions we might not have chosen for ourselves. Second, the Holy Spirit creates life. This happens in at least two ways. First, it's the Holy Spirit which breathes into us the Spirit of Jesus, making us spiritually alive. Second, in a practical sense, Pentecost was the beginning of the life of the church. The church, which is made up of all people who have faith in Jesus, forms the physical body of Jesus on the earth. And it's the breath of the Holy Spirit which brings life to the church. All of this means that Pentecost deserves to be right up with Christmas, Good Friday, and Easter as an important commemorative day for all Christians. It's certainly not a day which belongs only to those of a particular theological bent. But as important as Pentecost is, it does not come without challenges. How do we feel about the wind of the Holy Spirit blowing through our lives? Wind is welcome when it gently fills the sails, propelling our lives in the direction we want to go. But wind is unsettling when it pushes us off our selfishly intended course. We cannot believe in the life-giving breath of the Holy Spirit without accepting that the Spirit may wish to move us in directions which feel uncomfortable to us. To that we simply say, when we feel the Spirit blowing us in a direction which feels uncomfortable but which we know is right, we can be confident that we will also experience the breath of the Spirit's life. And so on this Pentecost Sunday, be bold to celebrate the ways in which the Spirit moves us. Who has seen the Holy Spirit? Neither you nor I. But when our lives are blown in a life-giving direction, God's Spirit has breathed upon us.